All right, for today's Industry Insight, I got a very interesting and very important topic to talk about. And this is regarding digital stores and the debate as to whether or not a digital store should have standards for what it should have available. And this is a very big deal because it goes or it ties a lot of various topics we've talked about in the past together, namely Steam, discoverability, and of course the challenges of selling and marketing your game. Now, the last time we talked about standards, it was regarding game design as a whole, or what elements should or shouldn't be associated with a video game. And that is easily another topic in of itself. But when it comes to digital stores, we have to first talk about how digital stores have differed from the traditional retail market. When it comes to traditional retail, at least when it comes to video games, your GameStops, Babbage's, Funko Lands, for those of you who remember, retail stores for pretty much up until 2007, 2008, when Steam really blew up, were the quote unquote gatekeepers of the game industry. Because you didn't have access to games outside of a physical copy, for the most part of the industry, this was the only way for a lot of people to get access to video games. And if a store didn't carry the game, it might as well not have existed. And this gave retail stores a lot of power, especially in the early days of the industry of like the mid 80s through to the 90s. Basically, if the store didn't want your game or you didn't pay enough, your game wasn't going to get sold. And again, this was pre Amazon and pre the standardization of internet. So no one could buy your game at GameStop or an EB, then your game is just dead in the water. And this meant for developers and publishers that they had to jump through a lot of hoops in order to get their games into stores. Some famous examples would be replacing the Holy Cross of Castlevania with that boomerang, removing any kind of religious or polarizing topics from games. And even then, that didn't necessarily mean that your game was going to be given full coverage. As you all know, one of the major points of a physical store is that there is an actual limit to how much they can cover or fill the store with. And just because you got in the store could have meant that your game was put way in the back there behind magazines, or you have a right at the front counter a massive display. And again, for a lot of games, this was pretty much what they had to do. And because of how retail stores control things, you need to have enough clout to even get your foot in the door. Major hits of the last few years like Stardew Valley, Five Nights at Freddy's, Undertale, probably wouldn't have even seen the light of day if they tried just walking into a GameStop or trying to get in touch with someone to get their game in the store shelves. And this kind of regulation and quality control basically rubbed everyone the wrong way. And why digital stores became such a very big deal over the last decade. That moment when you realize that not only did digital stores essentially had infinite copies of a game, but you could buy it anytime you wanted, get the game download, and you never had to leave your home to do it, you could hear the angel choir above you. And pretty much digital stores were the major factor behind the rise of the independent market. Because again, with no one vetting these games, it meant that no one was saying, this can't be in the store, or you must change this. And again, we could spend the next 5-10 minutes just listing all the amazing indie games we've saw in light of this. But like a Pandora's box opening, this has led to a major issue of discoverability and quality control when it comes to digital stores. Because everyone is getting in equally, it makes it very hard to find games. And we've talked about this many times in the past, but once you put your game up on a store shelf, you have a window of about 30 to 45 days, give or take, to earn the bulk of your profits. Because that's when the game is still being considered, new and in the news and front page. After that, your game disappears outside of people who are actively searching for it. And if your game doesn't make those sales in that time, then you better hope that a big name YouTuber decides to cover it. Now, from a quality standpoint, again, we have seen all walks of games on stores like itch.io, Steam, and the like. And one of the bigger points is how everything is being broadcast or publicized evenly. During our live stream a few days ago, by the time of this recording, I was seeing on the front page feature of Steam Agents of Mayhem, a AAA game, right next to Bear Simulator. Not so much a AAA game. And when everything is being tied together, it creates a perception that everything is being given equal treatment. That something like Agents of Mayhem is equal to Call of Duty, which is equal to Five Nights at Freddy's, which is equal to Bear Simulator, which is equal to Showering with Your Dad Simulator, and the like. And that's not good, because the major purpose of a store, and especially with a retail store, is quality control. The whole idea is that when I walk into a supermarket, no matter where I'm at, I expect that store to have done due diligence. I don't want to buy something that is, poisonous, harmful, past its expiration date, anything like that. And if the store messes up, they're liable for that. And that's why they have very strict standards, or they should. When it comes to digital stores, however, there are no standards. And again, you can have games that are maybe 20-30 minutes in length next to 80 to 100 hour games, AAA next to indie, indie next to shovelware, and so on and so forth. And this presents, again, two big problems. From a quality control standpoint, it makes it really hard for the consumer to trust games. And also, it makes them have heightened expectations about what they should be getting. When they see a $2.99 game next to a $50 title, they're expecting them to be relatively even in terms of quality. And we've seen consumers, of course, complain, why does your game have bugs? Or, why is your game $20? It's right next to this $5 game, and they both look the same. And as we've talked about, every game is different when it comes to game design. That in of itself is its own topic. Now, from besides just from a quality standpoint, there's discoverability. Again, every day, and right now for those of you watching this video, I don't care when you're watching it, whether you're watching this when it goes up or a week, a month, or a year from now, I'm sure at least 2 to 3 dozen games have been released this very day that you are watching me. When we talked about Steam Direct and the problem that $100, I think it was $100 or $200 fee is just a drop in the bucket for a lot of developers. And that's not good in terms of trying to promote, higher quality games. And I just double checked, it is $100, so that's even worse. Now, when I did my piece on Steam Direct a few months ago, I said that I wanted it to be a larger fee. And this is probably going to be the first major controversial point for today. But when it comes to having standards, I am for it when it comes to digital stores, thinking from a consumer standpoint. And this is a part that may get me into trouble with some people. But just because you make a game doesn't give you the privilege of getting onto a digital store. Again, when we look at other industries, and even back in the old days, you had to work for it. You had to prove that your product was good enough, it was high quality enough, and that it could be sold to make it onto these store shelves. Because a retail store doesn't want to sell a game that may only earn them 50 cents to $2 here and there. And it's time for the other shocking moment. I'm sure for those of you watching this will surely make you faint or fall out of your chair. Steam is not your friend. Steam has never been anybody's friend, other than, of course, Valve. And Valve and Steam want to make money. And the best way for a store to make money is to have as many products it can offer. It's basically going for the carpet bomb strategy. It doesn't care what it puts in front of you as long as you are buying games. And because of this has turned Steam from a digital store into essentially a virtual bazaar or marketplace where everything is assaulting the consumer, making it hard to decide what's high quality and what's not. And now for me, thanks to my contacts in the industry and my friends who follow games and such, I am relatively spared trying to find a great game. I have way too many games to play. But for the average consumer, if you only have $20 to spend a month on a game, How are you going to decide what game to buy when the second you load up Steam or go on itch.io or Green Man Gaming, you are just hit with all these games? And like we've said, without standards, especially for a digital store, it becomes a no man's land or a lawless land in term. I know, Wild West. There we go. In terms of trying to get your game in front of people. Now, when it comes to standards, again, if there's two things the game industry is bad at, one, it's archiving information, and two, it's trying to set standards. And the reason, again, goes back to the argument of art versus a product. Because the millisecond you try to set a standard or say something should be like this, there will always be collateral damage. Like I said a few minutes ago, I don't care how great Undertale or Five Nights at Freddy's or Binding of Isaac and so on were, they would never have gone onto a store shelf like a GameStop or a Walmart or anything like that, because these stores had very high standards. When we talk about things from a digital standpoint, again, whenever we enact any kind of restrictions, there's a good chance that a good game or two, or even three, are going to get caught in that crossfire. Imagine if Steam tomorrow announces that no game made by Unity is allowed on Steam, or all video games must be able to offer at least $10 or more in value to be on the store shelves. Or even something like your game must be compatible on PC, Mac, and Linux from the get-go, or you're not allowed to be on Steam. Again, with any kind of restriction, there's going to be a good game from a developer who may not have the money for all this extra stuff and is unable to get on the platform. And again, it comes into this real tricky debate as to how much should we restrict these games. Like I said, I am definitely in the for when it comes to having standards for digital stores. But the problem, though, is what should those standards be? And I am not going to answer that question here. That's not a 15-minute video. That's an hour to hour and a half discussion. But for you folks watching, what do you think about standards? Now, on our live stream, one of the commenters suggested simply having like a indie versus a AAA category. So all the indie games stay over here, all the AAA games stay over there. But then, of course, we run to the ever sticky debate as to what's considered indie, what's considered AAA. And even then, while this will stem the tide to some extent, it's still going to leave a lot of games just still overwhelming the person. Now, the other major point about digital standards, and what we'll wrap up today's industry insight about, is a very tricky topic, and that is the stores themselves. As we've seen over the years following Steam, we have seen quite a number of digital stores pop up to try and take that crown away. GOG, Humble Bundle, Indie Gala, Gamergate, itch.io, and so many more that I am forgetting right now. And the point is, every store comes out trying to say we're new and different from Steam. The problem, though, is when every store has no standards for its merchandise, then technically every store is the same. Except, of course, Steam giving you the value being tied to the digital platform and why it's still considered the 800-pound gorilla. But again, it raises this point. For any new store that comes out, if you're just going to be as accommodating and open as Steam is, then what's going to set you apart? People have already said, or I've heard some rumors, that itch.io is already reaching that saturation point, that it's getting harder and harder for new games to stand out, because once again, everyone's invited on. But here is the tough part, because it creates a very bad catch-22. If a store has rigid standards that keeps games off of it, then it's going to make it harder to attract new games to that. Because why would you want to risk putting your game on a platform that's very restrictive? So you're going to go to Steam anyway. But if you're on Steam, then you're also dealing with discoverability issues there. It's an issue of, is this store too lax, or is this store too rigid? And again, without having a standardized set of rules, it's just anybody's game. But one thing that I've been thinking about is that if a store can come along and guarantee these standards and make it fair for everyone, it could, and again I'm saying could by theory crafting here, it could stand to compete with Steam. But again, it raises the problem that why would you go to a new and untested store? Because even though you may be the only game in town, how many people know about that store versus Steam or Humble Bundle and so on? Again, it's not an easy answer to, or it's not an easy question to answer. But when it comes to trying to market your game out there, there's only so many avenues out there. And everyone being the same, it's just having the same problem over and over again. We talked a few weeks ago about some new digital store that was going to offer a Netflix for games, but again, that's not really the same idea as owning these titles that you do with these other stores. But to wrap things up for today, again, I think something needs to change, because if a store wants to project itself as a brand and prove that it has quality, there has to be restrictions in place. But again, no matter how small they are, there will sadly be games that are going to be caught in that crossfire. And the question is, what is the acceptable level? Again, I don't have the answer for it, but I am sure for you folks watching, there will be some interesting comments below, depending upon where you stand on the debate regarding digital stores and discoverability. But with that said, we're going to wrap things up for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check back for daily discussions on game design here and on GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. Until next time, have a great night. Oop, apparently it didn't go off. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And come back around 10 Eastern for regular streaming. For a collection of my writings as well as weekly podcasts on game development, be sure to check out game-wisdom.com. Follow me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day. And to help support everything that I do, you can find me on Patreon under GWBycer or Game Wisdom. Your donations can help to keep things running, and when we hit some goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy. So, thanks again for watching, and be sure to come back for daily discussions on game design on the Game Wisdom channel.